Buddhism. And what beginner's mind is it's this ability to constantly see life and things almost for the first time every single time. Now, this may seem like it's an easy trait, but it's really not, because our brains are kind of made to see things repeatedly, and as soon as they get repeated, it's sort of like makes this little kind of automated programming going on in your mind, and you just keep thinking the same thing over and over and over again. Yeah. So to have this beginner's mind, this really requires a lot of awareness to be able to do this, all right? And the beginner's mind really is when you are just able to constantly learn new things, to constantly see the world as if for the first time. So you're very flexible, you don't really hold on to beliefs, you don't hold on to your ego identity anymore, you kind of hold it really lightly, so you don't really hold on strongly to any certainties. You just kind of, you have a beginner's mind, you're always willing to learn new things, always willing to learn new things. You see, if you ever meet a so-called spiritual person that thinks they know everything, they're not a spiritual badass because they're missing this key characteristic. The beginner's mind is essential, okay? So never lose this characteristic, no matter how old you are, no matter what kind of expert you think you are, no matter how good at life you think you are. Always remember in the back of your mind to cultivate this beautiful openness and curiosity to learn new things, to see things differently, to not hold on to beliefs or certainties, to just everything lightly and everything open, because that's how you cultivate this beginner's mind, and this is the first key core trait of a spiritual badass. The second.
So what she's saying here, I listened to this guy named Aaron Abke as well, and this actually resonates. So she's saying beginner's mind. This really resonates with what he said. He compared the beginner's mind to Olaf in that movie Frozen. And what he says is when you're able to see something from a naive perspective where you kind of haven't seen it before and you see the joy in everything, that is actually enlightenment. That is what enlightenment is. And that's what she's saying. She is saying, the minute we look at something, we begin, the light hits our eyes, and then our brain creates a picture. There's a picture created somewhere, right? And then our brain begins to interpret whatever it is that we see with judgment and our past experiences. So what she's saying is if you can actually look at something without the interpretation process, that is what a beginner's mind is. And that eventually, the more and more you do this, that's what enlightenment is. That's what brings you freedom, which is what brings an end to suffering, which is what enlightenment is. So this, she's named it number 1, but to me, this is an absolute trait. It comes a little bit later in your spiritual journey, but if you bring awareness to it now, awareness to having a beginner's mind, I think it's really important. It's benefited me so much. All right, let's go.
Core trait of a spiritual badass is that a spiritual badass is very curious about life, so curious about life. They have this beautiful open curiosity. This is very similar to the first characteristic. And what this one means is that you're basically constantly asking questions. You're constantly looking for new things, for different things. You're constantly asking questions. You have no certainties, not a lot of beliefs. You're just kind of open to everything. And what we find is that as people really go along their spiritual path and become more in their mastery as a spiritual being, they actually become almost like they age backwards. They have this sense of wonder. They know they have no certainties, and they are just completely open. The more mature they are on their spiritual path, the less they say they know. This may seem like a paradox, right? How do you mature, but then you think you know less? Well, It's because the spiritual badass is so open and so curious about life that they really don't take life that seriously. Their curiosity never stops, okay? And you'll see this in great spiritual masters where they become almost childlike in their behavior. The Dalai Lama is one of them that has this energy, this childlike energy. No matter how much the Dalai Lama knows, no matter how much he's studied across decades and decades, when you listen to him speak, he speaks with this childlike wonder, and he speaks with this, he's very curious about the world all the time, okay? So that's a great image of what it means. This is the second trait of a spiritual badass, is this open curiosity about the world. Core trait number.
Yeah. So the curiosity, it starts with asking, like, why. I know for me, this curiosity about life started when I began to ask the question, who am I? Like, who am I? What do I love? I was so lost for so long. And the answers didn't come until I started laughing more, enjoying myself more, started embracing that childlike nature again, and just let loose a little bit. Also, I want to just say what she's saying about ask more questions, be curious. We don't always need to be problem solvers. I really practice this with my son. When my son was growing up, like at age 4, 5, 6, whatever, even now, I make it very, like, if I have to discipline him, I'll discipline him. But one of the things that I've always been really good at doing, and I think I do this with a lot of people, is I ask, why'd you do what you did? What was the purpose of that? How did that make you feel? I ask the questions because I know not to assume. I cannot assume that, he did something like, an assumption is my perspective. So always be curious to people's behaviors instead of pinpointing an emotion on them based on your thoughts and your past experiences. So yes, be curious. Next.
3 is that a spiritual badass surrenders to life. I talk about this a lot in my videos, so I'm probably a broken record when it comes to this, but surrender is a key trait on the spiritual path. It's so key, and the spiritual badass knows how to do this, okay? So no matter what life throws at a spiritual badass, they always say yes. They always say yes. If God says jump, they jump. If God says swim, they swim. Whatever it is, they do it. They keep surrendering to life. They keep saying yes to life. Now, they keep doing this and they keep surrendering even through extreme difficulties sometimes, okay? This happened in my life, and it happens in the life of so many people that I work with. We have to learn how to surrender through the difficulties and the challenges of life. And so what ends up happening with the spiritual badass is very different from a person who's not spiritual or a person who's unawakened. So what happens with the person who's unawakened is the challenges and difficulties, the pains of life will end up making them, they'll become hardened, they'll become cynical, they become closed down. The spiritual badass is the other way around. So they surrender into everything, meaning that whatever challenge, whatever pain comes into their life, they surrender into it. And instead of becoming hardened and cynical about life, they become more open, more tender, and more loving. Right through every single challenge and every single pain, okay? So this radical surrender, it's really what a spiritual badass does really well. Radical surrender is just knowing that I'm taken care of, that I'm loved, that I'm so honored, that the universe loves me, that I live in a benevolent universe.
Surrender on a regular basis. Fear goes away. Like right now, I am kind of in between. I'm making changes with my business as an entrepreneur, and I'm coming back on. I want to grow my YouTube base and just do more teachings, right? And just get out there. And this is new again. This is now, in the last 7 years, my third almost change in profession, which is huge. It's fast because I've been go, 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 go for so long. But the whole process, the reason I've had faith is because I've surrendered. And this time around, coming onto YouTube and doing these teachings, doing these reaction videos, I don't have as much fear. And there is something else that surrender does, and that is you just know you're going to be okay. You know, like, you know that within the surrender, you are taken care of to the fullest. You are going to be okay. All right, next.
Badass values direct experience above all. So I talked about this already in this video. A spiritual badass really is focused on direct experience of life, of the universe, of God, of nature, of whatever it is. They rely on direct experience. They won't take anyone else's word for it. They have to feel it or experience it themselves. All right, so that's a key core characteristic of a spiritual badass. They may listen to others, they may watch videos, they may have, you know, a master or a coach or whatever that helps them through, but at the end of the day, the spiritual badass will always end up relying to their own internal compass. And it doesn't matter if they have a bazillion people around them. It doesn't matter if they have a coach or whatever. The coach or the teachers can help them, but at the end of the day, they still rely very strongly on their own internal compass and on their own direct experience, okay? So that's very, very key for the spiritual badass, is this ability to just directly experience all these non-ordinary states of consciousness, to directly experience God or love or source or connectedness or oneness, whatever you want to call it.
This is so true. I no longer, like, if I'm gone out with girlfriends or just friends, whatever, and people are talking about this vacation spot, let's say they went to Cabo and they loved it, and they're like, you gotta go, you gotta go. I don't take people's word for stuff anymore. I'm like, if I did go, I would not make an impression of even a travel spot unless I've been there. And this just, like, I didn't, now that she's saying it, like, I guess that maybe that definitely started as my spiritual journey, like, as I progressed on my spiritual journey. And it's like, I just don't take people's word for things, for anything anymore, not for a single thing. I absolutely need to experience things on my own, whether it's like making my own judgment on whatever, like, places, a gym that